I really have gotten so goddamn good at that. I rifle through, throw those links all over the place. The only thing that I didn't do was do this. Anyway, hey, what's up? My name is James Cole. I'm the owner of PaydiRtDFS.com. I am joined by Pablo for our Slate Talk. This is a really big leverage / decision making oriented show that we do, stream, whatever this you want to call this. And this is focused on NFL DFS. So what we usually do that's a little bit different than general industry talk is we're not going to be focusing as much as on individual players today and like position by position and game by game. Like we'll hit on some of that stuff, but the vast majority of the stuff that we talk about is decision making and how to leverage the field and how to actually build lineups that give you a chance to win. So, if this is the first time joining us, then welcome. If it's the umpteenth time joining us, then appreciate the support. Pablo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I think this is like a really interesting slate. Like from just a macro game theory standpoint, from a small field versus large field, how you approach it. It's like another slate where I think the most obvious approaches are not in any way debatable. And so it kind of forces you to think through where you want to take stands and what you're going to be convicted around. And so I don't know. I kind of like that about football. Football is so game theory driven, and when you have a slate like this where it feels like almost one way or the other, it forces you to make decisions in a way that I feel like is good when you do them consciously and with conviction.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think as I've been looking through the slate and as I've been kind of like thinking about and brewing on it, I actually did do kind of a look ahead show with Bobby Fye over at Shoot DFS on Wednesday, which I never fucking do. But as I was doing so, I was looking at the pricing, and the pricing is just awful on this slate, for lack of a better word. The pricing algorithm for DraftKings has been atrocious to start the year. And like we've just been underpriced kind of across the board outside of wide receiver. Wide receiver feels about right, but running backs underpriced, quarterbacks underpriced. And so that's kind of a driving factor in a lot of decisions that we're making, especially because we have not one, but two $4,000 quarterbacks this week. And last week I talked about it at length, and it was my main talking point, which was like, why is Mac Jones not going to be like 30-something% owned? And I went over all the math, and I went over all the different combinations, and I went through like the different combinatorial analysis. And it was just like, Mac Jones is a massive, massive value on this slate, and everybody should be playing him. But lo and behold, he was like 7% owned or something, right? I had 25%. And this week we have two of those quarterbacks that are available in arguably better spots. At the very least, Carson Wentz is 100% a better spot than Mac Jones was last week because he gets Justin Jefferson with him. So like we have these instances where we have these really cheap quarterbacks. And the thing that I keep thinking to myself is, how is this even a thing in 2025? Like we have backup running backs priced up to 5K. How the fuck do we have backup quarterbacks not all at 5? That doesn't make any sense, especially after Mac Jones was 4K last week, and then DraftKings was like, oh, well, we should probably, that's a crazy thing. And then they're just like, fuck it. Everybody else is 4K this week. So I think that's kind of a crazy thing. And I think the field's going to make that same mistake again this week. And we'll talk about it, obviously, as we go through the show. But I just want to touch on the fact that I just think that pricing has just been bad this year. We have a lot of guys who are just way underpriced across the board. And, that might, there's some bias there for sure, I think. But
I think that's a good segue to like the chalk builds and just starting there before we sort of talk about positions and field psychology. So I think there's a couple of value situations this week that are a little bit different from one another, and I think it's important to think through them. First of all, there's value that's just like dumb, right? Like I would characterize that as like Keenan Allen's price this week is dumb, and Rome Odunze's price this week is dumb based on their value, but just based on their usage and based on admittedly small sample, but how they performed so far. And then there's injury driven value, which like is clearly Wentz, Mariota are the main two injury driven values, and then Jordan Mason at running back.
Yeah.
Those are like the things of like, they did the pricing and then these guys weren't out yet. Now they're out, so they're kind of just like completely mispriced. The first decision that I think any player is gonna have to make is, are they playing punt, Mariota, or Wentz? And I think they're a little bit different from one another in a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
Versus Caleb, who's going to be certainly owned, but I think being held in check by a little bit by those two guys. In a game that has shootout potential with a significantly higher total than every other game. That's very game stackable and is also a late game, so it gives you some late swap flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you, because I think those are definitely the main kind of three guys are Mariota, Wentz, and Caleb for small field. And then do you think about a more off the path but high ceiling quarterback like a Herbert, which we could talk about, which I think our models at least loved before I reloaded them. I don't know where he is now. And I think that's the first decision, because like you said, like Mariota and Wentz both allow you to pay up at basically every spot. And you've got, if you accept that, I forgot one injury driven value play this week, which is Kenny Walker, right? Kenny Walker is also like ridiculous value with Charbonnet out. Because between Mason and Walker, some combination of Duduze and Keenan Allen, and then Wentz or Mariota, like you basically can then spend up at the other positions. And so you can fit every stud you want. And so I think it's an interesting debate. Like, first of all, I think Mariota versus Wentz, they're two very different situations, right? Wentz is, first of all, Wentz has JJ Jefferson. That's different, right? He also has TJ Hawkinson, who I think is kind of a sneaky play when you have a quarterback who I don't think is particularly good. And TJ Hawkinson, I think, is 38 or 3,900, who also happens to be leverage off of Jordan Mason if you don't want to play Jordan Mason for some reason. Mariota is just like, he projects like a god, and I think I think Mariota is like the decision you have to start with on this slate. Like, do you believe in his projection? Do you believe in the outcomes that the models are all telling us? Because the whole industry is showing the same thing. Like, the whole industry is showing that he's got a great projection. He's like ridiculous value. And I know you're bullish on him, and I don't blame you, because that's what the models say. My only word of caution is like, it would be not surprising to me to see Mariota, because of the situation he's in. Eckler's out, and the Commanders just haven't been that great on the early going against, I think, a Las Vegas defense that is slightly underrated. And they've had their problems in O-line. They have like a guy coming back from injury, and I don't know that it's like the best matchup for Washington as much as people think he is. Mm-hmm. And then you have Wentz coming in for JJ McCarthy and a really good team against a shitty Bengals defense. But Wentz sucks. Like, this is like his 7th NFL team. He can't stick with any team. But he has JJ Jefferson. So I don't know. I think they're definitely analogous to what's his face in San Francisco that we did last week. Mac Jones. But I don't think that either of them is like, Wentz sucks and you're using him because he's playing against the Bengals and he has JJ Jefferson. Mariota, I just think is like, I think that the projection is more fragile than anybody would like to admit. And I'm not knocking the play. Like, 4K for these quarterbacks in this situation is ridiculous. But I just want to point out that we have a ton of value also at receiver and at running back. And if you think the projection is more fragile than the models would suggest, I don't think it's crazy necessarily to pay up for somebody who has maybe a slightly more robust projection.
Yeah, so the Mariota projection comes from some rushing floor that Carson Wentz just doesn't have.
Yeah.
which is funny actually because he used to have it, but he doesn't have it anymore. But the thing with them again, and I made this point last week with Mac Jones, is that we're not really aiming to compare them against other quarterbacks. Now, if you do, you still get them as good values, right? But you do not get them as the same kind of value that you would get comparing, say, a 4K. Like if you were to get, let's think of like a kind of a mid-range wide receiver, like Brian Thomas Jr. At 4K versus, say, a different wide receiver, a DJ Moore, right? In that conversation, right, you would look at them next to each other and you would say, okay, well, if they have a similar projection, then I'm not really like, I want to play BTJ, but I understand that his projection is very volatile and very wide. Whereas with quarterbacks, it's just not that usually. Like you can kind of expect their range of outcomes to be much more narrow as a position. So even though, yes, I think that Marcus Mariota and Carson Wentz both have less upside than other quarterbacks, I still think that when you compare them against other positions, you end up seeing them as just almost like nuclear value. I mean, let's do that, the same exercise that I did last week.
Yeah, and while you're looking that up, I don't disagree with that. My only point is really that value, that relative value of quarterback is more valuable on slates when you also don't have stupid wide receiver value and stupid running back value.
Right.
Because you don't, like, it's still valuable. I'm not saying it's not valuable. It does allow you to get up from a mid-range player to pay up, or maybe even two pay ups you wouldn't be able to afford. So that's not meaningless, right? But it's almost like you're comparing like the relative value of Mariota to the relative value of like Odunze. Like it's not, because it's one's at quarterback and the other's at flex. So the quarterback pay down allows you to pay up at flex, so you can get up from like an Odunze to somebody higher. But it's almost like that's the more appropriate 1v1 here than it is the quarterback to the pay up quarterback.
Right. It's also worth saying that last week, Mac Jones projected for like 15 or 16. And then the next player at 4K, I mean, we can do the same thing here. This is the same exact thing that I did last week. I agree with your point, by the way, that when it comes to this slate specifically, we have so many other values that it does not make the quarterbacks as valuable as values, right? Because when we look at this, right, this is just $4,000 or less. The gap here from Carson Wentz to Troy Franklin is acceptable, right? Like that is acceptable. Last week when we basically had Mac Jones, who projected like Marcus Mariota, and then next was Troy Franklin. We had like a 4 or 5 point gap between the next best value play. And this week we don't have that. So it's less valuable on a slate like this. I do agree with that. However, when we're considering a scarcity position at the same time, I think that is important as well. Whereas if you can go from, say, here's the fun example, Dak Prescott down to Carson Wentz or Marcus Mariota, while maintaining having CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, right? Like that makes it so that you have the extra money then to go from a Troy Franklin to a JSN or something.
And by the way, I think this is partially a field size thing. Like, and it's actually almost the opposite of what you would think, in my opinion. I think that in a slightly larger field or even mid-sized field, playing that unpaired quarterback, if you have to make a sacrifice by pairing the quarterback with, like, if you're making the decision between Caleb Williams with Odunze and Moore, right, versus going down to Mariota, and I think in terms of ceiling, what you would probably find if you simmed those two options like 1,000 times or whatever, is that probably the ceiling on the Mariota lineups is better.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that the median would be that different, and I'm not sure that the robustness or the lack of fragility in the median, because of the correlation you get with Caleb for smaller field, is as much as a no-brainer as you would think. That's my biggest point here.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. On this specific slate, I would agree with
Yes.
that. I would also like to say that I think that the play this week is not so much to look at the value quarterbacks as where you start, but to look for opportunities to utilize them to find upside.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing that I'm thinking of, the thing that I think would be the best use of the 4K quarterbacks this week is in Ram stacks and Dallas stacks, where if you can go just build out your favorite Ram stack, just build out your favorite one, and then just say, fuck you, Matthew Stafford, I'm going down Marcus Mariota. I think that that's a terrific move, just in all formats. Because the savings then allows you to go up from somewhere else and build a better, more robust lineup while maintaining quite a bit of the equity that you have from the wide receivers.
And when I was talking about like the ability to see what the field will generally do and how do you use that as a way to either micro or macro wise build differently. Micro meaning you're seeking those higher upside players or stacks that aren't going to be used as much. Macro being you're maybe potentially flipping the build on its head a little bit. If you kind of have to understand where the builds start, right? And I think the chalk builds, and because I don't think there's one. I think there's there's essentially two. One is Mariota or Wentz with the value receivers. We're talking about cash builds, right? Chalk cash builds, which are probably going to be Odunze, Keenan Allen. It's some combination. The running backs are extremely clear this week. The running backs, there's a 1A and there's a 1B. The 1A in terms of chalk, and by the way, they all project to be decent chalk. Like they don't look like shitty chalk pieces, right? Is CMC, Walker, and Jordan Mason. The 1B, which is almost as chalky, not quite, but still really good projections, by the way, is Taylor on the Colts and Bijan against Carolina in Atlanta with the second or third highest total. So it's very clear that for small field, like those are probably the 5 running backs you're probably playing around. I don't know that that's where you're going to find your upside outside of those 5 guys. I do think there's some sneaky running backs, and I'm not saying that they're not good plays. I just don't know that it's necessary where you're going to separate yourself in smaller field is getting off one of those 5 guys: CMC, Walker, Mason, Taylor, Bijan. So the chalk build is going to be Mariota or Wentz, probably more Mariota because I think people are nervous about playing Wentz. Like
by the way, the chalk quarterback right now looks like Caleb Williams.
So which makes Mariota even more attractive, right? Because of what you can get, to your point, at ceiling at flex. It's going to be some combination of those 5 running backs, and then the wide receivers. There's really only like 2 pay up receivers that are in optimals. It's CeeDee Lamb, and JSN, and then at value it's Odunze and Keenan. Keenan Allen. There's one guy in the mid range at receiver who is somewhat akin to Bijan and Taylor at running back, which is Puka. Puka's like just below JSN, Lamb, and Keenan, Odunze in terms of ownership, and he's sort of similar to Bijan in a way that like Bijan has the ceiling that CMC has, but will be like significantly less owned than CMC is my prediction, at least in cash. And then the thing at receiver is that you and I'm sure this is part of what's making you excited about the pay down is that you have Jamar Chase, who's like a fucking could easily go nuke, right? With Browning, who's not terrible. You have Jefferson, who, if you're playing Wentz, is like, well, that's kind of like a little bonus you have over Mariota, where you don't really have like a clear stacking part with Mariota, but I don't know that you care because of your point around Mariota's rushing potential. You can kind of play him naked. And then there's like some sneaky plays at receiver, like Lad McConkey is sneaky. Like he's really fucking sneaky. Like he is not going to be owned anywhere near those running backs, right? So that's what going down to like a Mariota will do, or Wentz, is that you can get up to Lad McConkey, who's got like a fucking amazing role, and the Chargers, shocking at all the best ball bros and everybody else, are throwing at the league high pass rate. They have the highest pass rate in the league so far. So anyway, I think the chalk will be Mariota / Caleb. Maybe I don't know. I think it's going to be I think they're both going to be pretty owned. I think Caleb will be significantly more on the Mariota, but I don't think Mariota is going to be unowned, at least in sharper fields. With those 5 main running backs with Lamb, JSN, Odunze, Allen as value, and then fill in the rest, right? So the question becomes like, how do you start getting off of that in a way that gives you more upside, right? How do you? Got a visitor. Yeah, James is flying solo this weekend, so
Come on.
we got a special guest.
Need help with, baby.
Elphalus.
Elphalus?
Yeah.
You're trying to beat Elphalus.
But she's too hard.
Yeah, she's like a FromSoft boss. For those of you who have not played Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, the final boss in that game is ridiculous. Like, just like I don't beat her every time. She's insane.
She's not insane.
She is insane. Hey, don't attack the cats. What are you doing? Anyway, so hey, baby, I will help you with that after I'm done with the show. Okay? Can you wait a little while? Yeah. Can you wait a little while?
4, 3.
You're gonna count me down. What? Anyway, so yes.
So we know what the chalk builds are. The question I had for you is, and I have a separate question about receivers in a second, but is what's the best way to think about getting off those chalk builds for higher ceiling, right? Like how do you build for higher ceiling, and obviously with lower ownership, right?
Yeah. So when I'm looking at things this week, you did you kind of glanced over Jordan Mason a little bit. I think Jordan Mason will probably be, him and Kenneth Walker are going to be like the chalk running back combos. And you hit on Odunze, you hit on JSN. Juwan Jennings is also projecting for some ownership as well as one of the cheaper guys that we should expect to get some ownership. But the way that I look at it, or the way that I see it across the industry, is the builds are going to be this: cheap quarterback, cheap running backs, expensive wide receivers, and then an expensive tight end, because people have the money for it, right? So I think that you can mostly still follow that while being just a little bit different with your wide receivers. I think that there's probably a way to be more mid-range this week than there is to go with like the very typical way of building things out. And also, I think that there are ways to not necessarily play Jordan Mason, right? And I think that he will likely be the second highest owned running back on the slate, if not the top overall, because of 5,400 versus 5,800 for Kenneth Walker. We do really like Kenneth Walker. He projects well. He's going to have high ownership, but him and Jordan Mason are going to be 1A, 1B, I think, in ownership. So how can we kind of pass on that and find upside on that? So one of the main things is, if Jordan Mason is going to be 30% owned, it makes Carson Wentz that much more attractive as an option, because going with Carson Wentz plus Justin Jefferson plus DJ Hawkinson and fading Jordan Mason makes it so that you have direct leverage on 30% of the field while also maintaining the same kind of value proposition that you get with a 4K quarterback. It just makes him that much better of a play. Whereas we can also say, okay, if I'm going to play Jordan Mason, you can play Jordan Mason, say, with Carson Wentz and Justin Jefferson. And that's a unique way that people do not like to build, is with a running back in their stacks, right? So I think that both of those are ways to kind of get over the field when it comes to Jordan Mason. Kenneth Walker, there's nothing you can do, man. You should just play him. I mean, that's
So one thing that you should be aware of is just one correction, and also something that I think is going to make CMC a little more owned, is Juwan Jennings is questionable, and a lot of people think more trending to out.
That will make CMC a bit more popular. It'll also make Ricky Pearsall more popular as well.
Yep. So he's questionable, to be clear. So I don't want to get mad.
We also just got news that JSN is questionable with an illness, and that came in about 12 minutes ago. So
okay,
that would end up making it.
Yeah, Walker would be like almost unavoidable at that point.
Well, one, Walker would be unavoidable, and two, Cooper Kupp would be like mega chalk, I imagine.
Yeah.
Which would be funny that Puka and Kupp could be chalk and on different teams.
Let me ask you, because this is a good segue. What you just talked about in terms of the quarterback pricing and the receiver pricing is a good segue to a question I have for you, because I think it does affect your builds a little bit. I think it'll be pretty common I think it'll be pretty common for people who aren't using Caleb to still use some combination of Lamb Odunze, just because of that. They're going to want a little piece of that game with that total and that, predicted kind of track meet. So this is more, I want to get your thoughts on what are the situations where you feel better about playing a chalky wide receiver with or without his quarterback? Like, because it's going to be the same thing with Keenan Allen. Like a ton of people, even more than Odunze or Lamb, it'll be because Herbert's a little pricier and doesn't fit the more common chalk build here. It'll be way more common. It'll be very common to have Keenan Allen just solo without Herbert. So what are your thoughts on like what you get? This was the same situation we saw with Hollywood Brown last week, right? Like nobody was playing Mahomes, but everyone played Hollywood Brown, and he, by the way, didn't hit. And he was like, people were talking about him like he was extremely steady, good, reliable chalk last week. I'm not saying like it was a bad play. I'm just pointing out it didn't hit. So what are your thoughts about Odunze, Lamb without Caleb versus with Caleb, and for that matter, Keenan Allen with or without Herbert as owned pieces that project to be really, really good value? What are your thoughts?
I think it mostly comes down to what kind of a roster you already have, right? Like how are you inserting them? Are you playing them with a whole bunch of other chalky pieces? In that case, you probably don't want to play them. But if you can eat the ownership, then fuck it, I don't care. You just play, you play whatever chalk you want when you can eat more ownership. Say that
Do you care about the correlation part? Do you care about if you had two teams, one that was a Caleb team, okay, with Odunze plus or minus more, because I don't know that you really want to single stack Caleb, right? Versus Mariota or Wentz with Odunze and Lamb as a mini, but without Caleb, with almost the same median. Does the correlation matter to you in that situation? Well, is it a cherry on top, or does it not matter to you?
Think about what you just said for a second for me. Because you're asking, I think that what you're asking, what most people think to themselves is, should I play the quarterback with this wide receiver? But the wide receiver, that correlation towards the quarterback is not as strong as the quarterback towards the wide receiver, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
So like
the wide receiver can do fine and even pay off while the quarterback doesn't, right? We see this in Showdown all the time. Like this is a super common thing in Showdown is people feel like they have to play the quarterback. And it's like, no. Like it's relative to what the other players are doing. And the quarterback can easily not get there. Right. But while the wide receiver does, but the vice versa is not true. That's your point.
Right.
Yeah.
So the thing that you really ask yourself is not, should I play, Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen? Is it okay to play Keenan Allen as a one-off? Absolutely. Is it okay to play Keenan Allen plus Ladd McConkey without Justin Herbert? That's a question. Now, my stance on that is that I'm fine with not playing the quarterback there, assuming I have other quarterbacks that I think make better plays. Especially on a week like this, I'm fine with playing Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen by them, without Justin Herbert, and going down to Marcus Mariota, because I just have the extra money going down that way. Yes, Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen, if they both go 105 with 2 touchdowns, then Justin Herbert nuked. But if they both go 130 with 1 touchdown and 6-7 receptions each, they both probably still nuke the slate. But Justin Herbert only threw 2 touchdowns and got outscored by 80% of the quarterbacks in the slate. So it's not necessarily so much of a question for me in regards to the correlation as to whether I should play a one-off with their quarterback or not. It is a question of whether I should play multiple receivers from a team with their quarterback or not. And my stance is no, I don't really prioritize that all that much this year. Now, the last part of that is that when I am considering quarterbacks in the way that I'm building, that is where I consider whether the correlation has to matter or not. So for somebody like Justin Herbert, or, Jared Goff is the perfect example. I will never play Jared Goff without 2 wide receivers.
Yeah.
The dude's rushing prop is literally 3.5 yards. right?
Yep.
Matthew Stafford. There's zero chance I'm playing Matthew Stafford without two of his wide receivers, just because he literally cannot get there without like nuking with his wide receivers, right? Like most likely two of his wide receivers are really going to get there.
Let me add one more variable here and see if it affects your answer. And I don't disagree with anything you've said. It's more just, I think it's an interesting thing to think about, right? Because it affects how you build. How does game environment play into that, as well as field size? Because let's say I don't want to overweight the Bears Cowboys environment, because I'm not even convinced it's as good as an environment as everybody thinks it is. Like, this isn't indoor at New Orleans or indoor at Detroit last year, right?
Yeah.
And the total is like higher, but it's not like they're at they don't have like a 56 point total and everything else is at 43, right? So let's not overweight it, but let's just pretend that you felt really, really good about that game environment, right? And let's say you said, fuck it. Like, I want one of my lineups to be like a legitimate game stack at that game, which in my head, people define game stacks differently, but in my head, that's at least two players on both teams, in addition usually to the quarterback, right? Does betting on a game environment just outpacing enough of the other games where you kind of get this frenzy of scoring and it's like a feeding frenzy? Does that affect your desire or sort of inclination to try to overstack or not? Like, do you, is that a variable you care a lot about, or do you think that or is it just something that we tend to overweight?
I think people I want to say that people overweight it.
I'm sure it depends. I'm sure it depends, right? So it might be more useful to talk about it in this week's context, but I'm also curious about it in general.
Yeah. So first off, I think the people that weight it overweight it, but there's people who don't weight it who are obviously underweighting, right? Like, it matters, but from a perspective for me, that's already baked into the projection, right? So like, Dallas and Chicago already project pretty well because it has a really high team total.
Yeah.
So like, I'm gonna land on a lot of those guys regardless. It's less so that I'm going to aim to have a whole bunch of those guys in any given lineup, and more just say, okay, well, if it naturally happens, then it happens. Now, what I will say is, if I am making a coin flip decision, I want to weight that kind of thing. If it's a coin flip between two players, and there's two $5,500 wide receivers, and one of them is Rome Odunze, and one of them is, I don't know, Brian Thomas Jr. or whoever the fuck. I don't know what his price is this week, but say that it's that. And one of them is involved in the game stack. Like, I already have the Dallas stack, and then the other side, you know, I'm making the choice between Rome Odunze and Brian Thomas Jr. I'm probably just going to go Rome Odunze, right?
Yeah.
Because I get that. I get the extra little added correlative piece. But that being said, the correlation between a wide receiver one and an opposing wide receiver one is very small. The correlation between a quarterback and an opposing wide receiver one or wide receiver two is very small. So while it is there, it should not overstate the projection of the player. So in that same example, Rome Odunze and Brian Thomas Jr., if Rome Odunze and Brian Thomas Jr. both project the same for 14 fantasy points or something like that, then use the correlation. If Brian Thomas Jr. projects for 16 and Rome Odunze projects for 13.5, I'm playing Brian Thomas Jr. You know, I'm not playing Rome Odunze just because he's in the same game as the other part of my stack.
Yeah.
So I think that whereas a couple of years ago, you weren't able to as easily, or most people were not able to as easily kind of quantify what the correlation meant and how much we should weight it, we can mathematically do so, right? So like, nowadays, I don't think that there's any excuse for somebody to say, oh, well, you know, I'm just going to go with my gut on this because it's a game stack. Like, we can mechanically,
you can value that. You can value that. Yeah. One of the things that you're talking about a little bit is sort of, it's one aspect that you touched on is double counting, right? And sort of double counting ownership and projection and what it buys you, one versus the other. I want to tie that into like a little bit of field psychology here, which is at tight end, I think it's pretty clear that McBride will be the chalky tight end, right? I continue to have a hard time looking at his outcomes and feel that I would not be happier having a receiver at his price. Like I understand he's a beast. I understand he gets used a lot. But if you just compare his range to receivers around his price and above and below like $500, I think there's a bunch that have ceilings in perfectly good game environments, less owned than him. And to me, then that just makes me sort of want to find a slightly cheaper tight end and just play a receiver at his price. That's generally how I feel about McCarthy. Now, that might change. Like I might be docking him too much for his lack of touchdowns, which is more of a FanDuel thing. But he doesn't generally do the shit that you would expect McBride. Yeah. For his price. The other thing in psychology here that I'm just curious about, which is sort of narratives we have around quarterbacks and how it affects their skill players. And it matters, but I also think to myself, well, yes, that's already baked into their ownership. But I'm thinking about inefficiencies that are driven by the field getting over excited about things that are happening early on. One of the things people seem to be very excited about is Danny Dimes Jones being good so far, right? And my point there is like not about him, it's about Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren is still like independent of what you think about Danny, he's still pretty cheap and his usage has been stellar, right? But I do ask myself sometimes, like, are we more comfortable with this play at a pass catching position, specifically tight end or receiver, than we should be based off of early results on somebody who's super excited about? Meaning, like if Danny Dimes had gotten off to like kind of like what we expected, or at least kind of a shitty, like an average start, not like a 99th percentile great start, I think we'd probably be saying to ourselves, like, I don't know about Warren at this ownership. And I don't know about Warren. I don't even know about Warren's projection. Like, and I'm asking myself, like, do we really believe that Danny's going to continue to be this good? Like, is he just good now because he's got a good coach and they have like Taylor and a good line? Or like this week, is Danny going to like be a shitty quarterback that we've seen for the last 5 years? And we're going to be like, what the fuck were we doing playing Tyler Warren at like ownership, right? So it's kind of like, how do we justify or poke holes in players that are going to be owned because of early narratives, right? And I think it's worth questioning some of the things that we feel really certain about in the early going when we don't really know that much still.
Yeah, it's hard with quarterback changes. It's hard to justify something, it's hard to quantify something like Danny Dimes, right? Really quick before I answer that, though, I do want to answer some questions really quick from the chat because we haven't gotten to those. Are we supposed to just jam Wentz double stacks to the third of the field playing Mason at 5.4K? So I hit on that earlier. That was a question from earlier, and I should answer it earlier. But yeah, I think that Wentz stacks make a lot of sense. With Jordan Mason being probably 30% owned tomorrow, I think Wentz stacks just make a lot of sense. Let's get that bread damn straight. Let's bake that bread damn straight. Let's see. Start one, Kyron, Jordan Mason, or ETN non-PPR. Ooh, Jordan Mason.
Jordan Mason he's like a ridiculous play tomorrow.
I do really like Kyron's workload. And actually, we can go to running backs here. I know that this is non-PPR, but if we look at expected fantasy points, which, by the way, expected fantasy points is now in the models. You should go look at those.
Kyron's actually kind of a nice segue, James, to something that's worth pointing out, which is that there's so much like obvious, really good chalk this week that it leads to like 30 like shouldn't be sneaky, but really sneaky plays. Like there's like a ton of them. Kyron's one of them. Kyron's a really like he's completely unknown compared to the chalky running backs, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, like 1% owned or something. He's not going to be owned at all. And to that point, his expected fantasy points in terms of running backs on this slate, it's top 10. It's really good, right? Like it's above Christian McCaffrey, it's above Chase Brown, it's above Bucky Irving, right? Like his usage has actually been really good. So I do really like Kyron Williams. The reason why you go with Jordan Mason here just specifically to that question is just because his workload, like, yeah, his expected fantasy points are low, but he's stepping into a position where he should just get the vast majority of the workload. And Cincinnati's defense sucks. So, but if you want a coin flip, it's either him or Kyren Williams. They both project very well. Kyren Williams has gotten unlucky. Let's see. What's FanDuel? A shitty site ran by hamsters. Geno Bauer's about to nuke tomorrow. I do really like Bowers, but I have not liked Geno so far.
Yeah. Bowers, this is probably a little too ball watchy on my part, and I should try to discount it, but the range of outcomes reflects it for what it's worth. He has not got off to a good start, and he looked really gimpy last game. Like he almost didn't play.
Yeah, the injury. Yeah.
He almost didn't play, and he looks like the type of player where that actually affects him more than you would think. Like he clearly couldn't get the separation last game that you see from him. So I don't think it's crazy. He'll be like way less owned than McBride or Warren. But I think I don't know. I'm a little nervous about his injury.
Going back to what you had said though, with the Danny Dimes thing, it's hard to quantify the leap that a quarterback can make going from one organization to another. We have seen players get away from the Giants and just go fucking ape shit because the Giants organization is just such a black hole. So I think that it's probably fine to continue to trust that he will be at the very least a serviceable quarterback. Not what he has been. I don't think he's going to continue to just be insane. But when you look at, again, now that we can look at expected fantasy points in the models, like Tyler Warren's expected fantasy points is right in line with his projection, right? Like that's something that we mostly should just be like, yeah, okay, this has been real. His role has been terrific. Yeah. So with a role like that, this 4,400 range, last year, something that I made a lot of money with was just saying, okay, is this elite tight end $1,000 underpriced, right? Because the elite range is $5,500 or more. So is this elite tight end not the elite price yet? Just play him. Yeah. You get $1,000 in savings. And Tyler Warren is right there. The other guy, which by the way is we're looking at expected fantasy points, is Johnny Smith, 3,600, who's too cheap. And then we also still have guys like Juwan Johnson, who I don't know why his fantasy points say where. Oh, right.
Yeah, he's up there at the top at 39.
Yeah. So like these guys who have good expected fantasy points outcomes and like have had really, really good roles, like I think it's fine. It's actually interesting. Tight end this year, we have a dearth of options to where I don't see a need to play a Tyler Warren or a Trey McBride or a Jake Ferguson. Like I have no need to eat ownership on these guys. Now I'm fine with it. Again, going back to the Roma Dunze or the Keenan Allen thing with ownership in a lineup that can eat the ownership. But like if I'm eating a whole bunch of chalk, it's like, all right, I'm just going to get off Tyler Warren for Juwan Johnson, who's going to be 2% owned, or for David Njoku, who's going to be nothing owned, right? Mm-hmm. It's fine for me to do that. But trying to think through, getting back to the original question again, the Danny Dimes stuff, anytime that we're still this early in the season, I think that you can poke holes in most guys. We try to use things like expected fantasy points and utilization and the roles that these guys play to mitigate the variance, but there's always going to be massive variance on this stuff over small samples. So I think, especially with a position like tight end that is very touchdown dependent, you can always find ways to say, I don't trust that this is going to happen again, and find a different route.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the second part to why I don't seek myself finding a desire to play McBride. Like if I can get down to even like a Tyler Warren who's owned, but gives me the savings, and I can then get a receiver for McBride's price, it's like a double whammy. Or again, to your point, just get off ownership altogether and play like Juwan Johnson. Or if you really love the game script environment and Dallas, Chicago, consider Ferguson or someone like that, right? Just for that environment. So I don't know. I feel like it's easier for me to go down off of McBride than for similarly priced receivers or running backs, it would be. And I think that's specific to him. But I also just think of tight ends as receivers at this point. Like I don't look at them as any different. Like you just have to play one. But essentially, that's kind of like the debate you're always having: is receiver at this price or tight end at this price?
Yeah.
The one I want to talk about, just like a couple stacks that we think might be an interesting way if you just want to get off of like the play the cheap quarterback. Like, and the one that I am just in love with, and I don't think it's super sneaky, but I think it's for small field, I think it'll be pretty significantly underowned. For large field, I don't know if it has as much of an edge because of the pricing. I think Herbert double stacks are fucking bananas this week. Like he's not going to be. He's the guy. First of all, he's just looked phenomenal this year, right? You can play him with Ladd and Keenan. Keenan's stupidly priced, and I totally get your point about Keenan can get there while Justin doesn't. But if you pair him also with Ladd and you double him, and then there's also like an awesome across the aisle bring back with Franklin, who's nobody's playing as a value piece. Troy Franklin on Denver. So that's one way. I mean, for smaller field, I'm not like claiming this is super sneaky because I don't think it is. I don't think people are like, oh wow, like Herbert's some like crazy off the wall play. But I think in smaller field, he's going to be super unowned. And
I mean,
I'm kind of excited about it.
He's going to have no ownership at all. And to be fair, justifiably so. I understand why people aren't going to play him. It's because we have no less than 10 quarterbacks who are just like straight up great plays.
Yeah.
Right. So I get why he's not going to have any ownership, but the team total is good and everyone is going to play Keenan Allen. And so I'm totally fine with playing Justin Herbert plus Allen plus McConkey. I don't have any problem with that. My problem is like, I don't know how I get there with a handful of lineups, you know, like for me, if I'm going to MME this week, first off, if I MME this week, I'm going to have like 50% of my lineups be Wentz and Mariota. So then I only have another 50% of my lineups to be like, all right, do I like want like 2 Justin Herbert? Whereas it's probably more likely that I would end up with like Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen and no Justin Herbert because I played in a Mariota lineup. You know?
Yeah. And I actually played late slate heavier than I planned to. I'm one of the things I've tried doing this season, which I highly recommend for anyone playing with a meaningful bankroll. And meaningful bankroll you can define in a variety of ways, but to me, a meaningful bankroll is the amount of money that you would like. Is not just like money that you would be happy to lose, right? Like if I recommend, I know this is something we've said before, but people don't seem to think about it that much, which is I tend to reg like the day before or even 2 days before and really put some thought into how convicted I am around my plays to define how much volume I'm playing and also what contests am I going to play or what contests am I going to play based on how contrarian or not I am feeling on a given week. We all have our inherent style, but so we should all inherently be playing towards our style for the contest size, but also in a given week, your takes, your convictions may be more optimal or more contrarian, right? And you should tailor your volume based on how convicted you are on those things. And you should also tailor what contests you're playing based on what style of lineups you feel good about building this week. And I specifically entered more late slate lineups, the late however how many games it is, because I wanted more Herbert, and I was like, I can't really justify that much of him in the main slate.
Yeah. I'm heavily on your side on this week. Normally, I'm an MME guy right now, like for the last couple of months because of the portfolio manager. I've been a big MME guy. This week, I think I'm just going to play a single lineup and higher dollar stuff. And the reason for that,
I have 2 right now. That's it. And I think I'm done. I think I've already built my lineups.
Like, as I look at this slate, I'm just like, why would I do anything but play a cheap quarterback with some expensive double stack wide receivers, Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker, and just like figure out that, like, why would I not just play a lineup that I think covers every single base that I need to cover, that I have conviction on, and just kind of like, you know.
Can I watch something?
Can you watch something?
Is there play something?
Oh, play something. Yeah, I'll be done in a couple minutes, okay?
We're almost done. Done. It's my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault.
You can say, Pablo, rude. Pablo,
I know, I talk too much. We're almost done.
No, It's actually I was late today. So yeah, I look at this slate. I have a lot of conviction and just kind of like a lot of confidence in playing one of Mariota or Wentz, focusing on the wide receivers for the Rams, for the Cowboys, or for especially if JSN is going to be out, Seattle, right? I have a lot of conviction on these spots. I think that the running back pool is very small. There's like 5 or 6 guys that I really want to play. And so with that, it's like when you MME, one of the things that I think that you MME for is trying to make sure that you can kind of spread out your risk and spread out your volatility and put yourself in positions where like the things that you like can kind of mesh together in a natural way. That's what I think that MME is really good for. Yeah. But that really starts to have diminishing returns when there's like 13 guys you want to play, right? Because like then outside of that, you're just like, well, why? If I'm going to have like 60+% of my portfolio be like 9 guys, why wouldn't I just take those 9 guys and build one lineup and just, fucking full send it?
Yeah.
So,
and that's kind of what we talked about throughout this slate talk is like defining what your conviction is and how strong your conviction is. And if you're going to be convicted on something, first of all, you have to make a decision. Like you have to decide what are you putting your chips on, right? And also how convicted on that are you? The less convicted you are, the more you should hedge around it or build more diversity around it. The more convicted you are, the more willing you should be able to go all in on it, right? I feel very similarly. I have 2 lineups this week. I've been building 4 to 6 on most slates and even sometimes 10. And I keep finding myself doing the same thing over and over again. I'm like, I'm just going to play these 2 lineups. This represents how I feel about this slate. Before we answer any final questions, and there's one also in Discord that I think Kiki asked. Let's just talk about any low-ish. It doesn't have to be completely off the radar plays that we just one each that you think is a cool play this week. And I would prefer to pick at receiver, running back, because we talked a lot about quarterback. I'll do mine first because I may be blindsiding you with this question. But I'm not going to say Ladd McConkey because I've already talked about him a lot, and I'm definitely playing Herbert late stacks just to get some of him.
Yeah.
The one guy that I think is really interesting at receiver, who projects decently but not like a god. I just think he's going to be underowned, and his usage so far looks terrific this year. Is Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans is like a really nice play. He's probably too off the radar for the shit I play, so I don't know that I'll have him. He's at the bottom there. But I think he's just a sneaky play for his price range for that game itself. And he's a larger field play, but I would not be surprised if people are like, oh, fuck, I could have gotten Mike Evans at 2%, and he went crazy.
Yeah, I think mine's probably going to be Devontae Adams.
He's really underpriced. He's really underpriced.
He's way underpriced. He's going to be low owned. And I think that Rams team, I don't think that we're focusing on stacking them enough. Like people just in general. Like when you go over and you look at the stacks range of outcomes here, like they are the top overall projection.
And I heard some other podcasts in the industry. I really honestly don't remember which one. I listened to a lot, like the days leading up to football.
Yeah.
But they were pointing out that the Rams offense right now is like just like straight up Kyron. It's Puka and Devontae. Like Kyron gets some play, but that's he's not like a smash every week like it was some like last year for some period of time.
Right.
But the passing offense is like literally just those 2 guys. It's just those 2 guys over and over and over again.
Yeah. So it's just like they both have a 30+% target share right now. And that's crazy. To have a team total of just 19 and have the top overall projection in the stacks range of outcomes is nuts. They have a higher projection as those 3. And to be clear, like there's a good amount of that coming from Matthew Stafford, like a good amount, but it's not that much. It's mostly just Puka and Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
So Devontae Adams is 6,200. He's probably $1,000 underpriced, and it's mostly just because he's the wide receiver 2 on his team. Yeah. They both deserve to be $7,500. So you're getting a massive value on Devontae Adams, and I just think that he makes a lot of sense at the price point that he's at and makes a lot of other things work as well. So I'm really into him as a lower owned play. And then, just again, I just want to point out that we really should just be focused on trying to pay down at quarterback. Like that's just the other thing, because they'll be underowned, right? Like I just know that they're going to be underowned relative to the value that they represent, even on a slate like this. And the last one that I wanted to note was going to be T. Higgins, who T. Higgins has really, really good expected fantasy points right now. As we look at these guys, like his median is 13, but his expected fantasy points 17.5. That's not that much farther behind somebody like CeeDee Lamb. It's above Devontae Adams, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Christian McCaffrey, right? Like the expected fantasy points there is pretty good, and he's just cheap. At 6,100, I think that he makes a lot of things work. And especially in that game with Minnesota and Cincinnati, I think that Jamar Chase is obviously his expected fantasy points fucking sick. He's got the highest expected fantasy points in the league right now, but you're paying a price for it. Whereas for 6,100, I think that you get a pretty nice spot there. So T. Higgins and Devontae Adams, I think, are the guys that
and I think to your point on Chase real quick, and then we'll I think answer some questions before we call it, is what's really interesting about this slate is that even though you have Mariota and Wentz, the way that the constructions are playing out is that like Jamar Chase is still not very owned. And so what's interesting about it is that I think one of my takes is like, especially if you're playing Mariota or Wentz, like you should use it as an excuse to get one of the guys who has a fucking crazy ceiling at low ownership. Like don't use it just to like get a bunch of mid-range players who project well, right? Like use it to get guys who are going to have crazy ceiling like Jamar Chase who aren't that owned.
Right.
Like that's like what you should be spending, you know, what you just saved at the quarterback on, in my opinion, to get higher ceiling.
I'm going to build the worst fucking lineup this week.
Well, there's so many options. I mean, somebody said it's a really bad cash slate. It kind of is, because there's like 30 different crazy value options. Like it's all the cash lineups are all going to be great. And it's just going to be like, did you get unlucky picking the wrong chalky guy?
What?
Kiki asked in the Discord, James, he said, is playing Jefferson without Wentz in large field GPP silly or leveraged? Seems extremely unlikely unless Mariota just outscores Wentz.
Yeah, I think that combo, like for 11.5K, you're getting a wide receiver 1 plus his quarterback. That's really hard to match basically anywhere else. For instance, if you try to do that with like Dak and CeeDee Lamb, you're paying 13.9, right? So you do get a lot of savings, a lot of value there. But I think that it has to be phrased differently. I'm not comparing these 4K quarterbacks to other quarterbacks. I'm comparing them to other players that we can play, like in the flex, right? And I think that there are enough values on this slate to where I don't think that it's crazy to play like Justin Jefferson plus Troy Franklin or something like that, rather than say that you need to have him with Carson Wentz, because there's plenty of reason to think that if you're playing Justin Jefferson by himself, like you can do that because you still have so much savings from Jordan Mason and Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze and all these other guys. And it's not necessarily that you have the savings to do it because you have Carson Wentz. So I think it's fine to play him by yourself. I will probably play him by himself. It really depends on if I play him with Jordan Mason. So if I play Jordan Mason plus Justin Jefferson, I likely will not be playing them with Carson Wentz because I don't think I need to. But if I play Justin Jefferson by himself, it's very likely that I will also play him with Carson Wentz, because why the fuck not? It
would be really funny if like everyone's game stacking Chicago, Dallas, and then Cincinnati, Minnesota turns into like the trash can game, like crazy game, like I don't. You know, it's like Wentz, JJ, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Jordan, everybody goes crazy because they're all like super cheap, and but people are only using like 1 or 2 pieces from that game.
Well, they're also fucking massive star power. Like you got Justin Jefferson versus Jamar Chase, the wide receiver 2 of T. Higgins or TJ Higgins, right?
Yeah.
Or T. Higgins. Why the fuck can't I say anything? T. Higgins. They both have like running backs that are good, right? Jordan Mason is good, and Chase Brown is good. They have good tight ends. Like there's a lot of fucking good players in that game. It's just Jake Browning and Carson
It's
Wentz.
just like, and that's it. It's the question is like, can you, I think to close before we answer any final questions, I do think it's interesting to think about the way the field is viewing, hold on one second, James. I already fed him. Is the way the field is viewing the quarterbacks, like the narratives around them. Like people are generally like, Browning doesn't suck, but do I trust him enough to play Jamar Chase? People are like, Carson Wentz sucks, but I can afford JJ Jefferson, but do I trust JJ Jefferson to get there because Wentz sucks? Mariota isn't great and he's old, but he's got enough rushing upside and he's 4K and he allows you all these other things and you can play him naked. Caleb Williams is an interesting one. I'll just point that one out because like people fucking seem to be like irrationally against the guy, like more than what's normal. Like sucked last year. Some people think he sucked. I think there's three camps. There's like one camp that's like Mulligan. It doesn't matter because the team was so bad and the coaches sucked. And yes, maybe he's scarred, but it was only like one horrible year, so it didn't really scar him that bad, right? There's camp 2, which is like, no, he sucks. Like it doesn't matter that the situation last year was bad. Like he sucks. He's always going to suck. He's looked like shit this year so far. I'll talk about the merits of that in a second. And then there's a third group, which is like, I'm not sure. Like last year sucked. Like I'm not sure about him. I am more like in the Mulligan / I'm not sure camp. Like I actually think he's looked like week 1. I thought he looked pretty serviceable. And week 2, like Detroit is just really fucking good. Like I think people thought Detroit sucks this year because of their coaching all going away and because they got beat by the Packers, who might be the best team in the league right now. And I'm not, look, Caleb is owned. It's baked into his ownership. So let's not pretend he's not owned, right? He might be the most owned guy in small field. But I still do think that there's more of the field that he would be more owned if people don't think he sucks. And I think in general, the field thinks he sucks more than what is fair. I think it's an inefficiency in field psychology. That's my point.
Yeah, look, you and I have been talking about how we think that Caleb Williams has looked fine. So fine, right? I mean, he's fine.
Fine.
I think that you can apply all that same shit to Carson Wentz, though. and Carson Wentz is cheaper. So I think that Carson Wentz is actually like at least as good as JJ McCarthy, who I thought that he played fine. But are we really saying that it's a huge downgrade from?
Yeah, Evan Silva made that specific point. He said there were lots of rumors, like outside that one quarter where JJ McCarthy went crazy, right? Like, is it that crazy to believe that like Carson Wentz might be better at getting the ball to Jefferson than McCarthy was?
Like Carson Wentz was a good quarterback for portions of his career. The reason why people think that he sucks is because he had like one bad play for Indianapolis where he threw an interception to get them out of the playoffs. Like
people will have a much easier time. Like it'll be some combination of Caleb Mariota, like depending on what field you're in. And I think Caleb will still be more, but I still think Mariota will come in a little higher than people expect because he's getting pumped. And then it'll be significantly lower than that for Wentz. Like he will be significantly less than Mariota. And I think that's worth noting. Like that might be, to your point, the field psychology there may be more inefficient by a good margin on Wentz than anybody else on this slate.
Yeah, people just are gonna fucking hate on that guy. And I don't know. I mean, 4K, like we just saw Sam Darnold have like a fucking career year. They got him a contract. And you're telling me Carson Wentz can't do the same thing?
And by the way, he's got like a great coach. Like everybody knows that his coach is like a QB guy.
Kevin O'Connell's terrific. Look, like there's no reason why Carson Wentz cannot go out there, throw 303, 2 to Justin Jefferson for 180 yards, 1 to TJ Hawkinson, and put up 28 fantasy points.
Yeah. And it gives you a reason to fade Jordan Mason if you really want to.
That too.
It does give you that is bonus there. I did make that note when I was going through the slate. Like, if you do this, you can also fade. So I think Wentz doubles with Jay Jefferson and Hawkinson without Mason. Like that's kind of a sick leverage build.
Yep, you're damn right it is. Just build it.
Any final questions?
No, I mean we probably hit like pretty much everything.
Okay, great.
Let's see. Let me.
I'm saying from the listeners. Questions
Yeah.
from the listeners.
See, AK and TJ Higgins. Yeah, go fuck yourself. What would be amazing is if it rains, gets stopped with 1 hour to a delay. I'm not sure what game that is talking about. Maybe Chicago.
That happened that primetime game when it sucked.
The reason why Wentz is priority for me is because you have to get less things right. That isn't the case. You play Caleb Mariota. When Wentz smashes, he'll bring multiple guys with him. I mean, look, like
true for Mariota, not as true for Caleb. If Caleb smashes, he's bringing Odunze more with him,
or DJ Moore. People aren't playing DJ Moore.
Yeah, I think. By the way, I do think that's another way. We talked about this last week, but it is okay to also say to yourself, "Hey, I am going to play some of the owner's own stuff in a more creative way." DJ Moore, like everyone's so sure about Odunze. DJ Moore's like everyone's decided like he's not part of the offense. He's not owned.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think
is fucking crazy, by the way, because there were times when he nuked at
so if you play Caleb, just double him with fucking Moore and Odunze. Don't single him with Odunze. Like just double him. That's a creative way to use Caleb.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
All right. That's
cool.
that's the whole thing. This has been a really good one, even though Damascus has been very.
I think that made it even better.
I agree, it made it even better. But yeah, this article or this show always kind of like puts me in the right state of mind. Wanted to go there. If you enjoyed all of this, and if you enjoyed looking at the models and you want to see all the things the models have to offer, come get a subscription over at paydirtdfs.com. $40 a month gets you everything. I'm not a hack. I want people to have access to stuff. It's advanced models for everyone, not advanced models for people who can make this more than a hobby. So come get a subscription over at Paydirt. If you want a yearly subscription, you can do that as well. Or if you just want to try things out for a day, you can for $5. If you have any questions for me or for Pablo, you can reach out in the Discord. You can find the Discord here under information and go to the Paydirt community Discord. It is free to join, and it's a terrific Discord. I think that today we have been making fun of, what have we been making fun of today? Oh, the politics channel. Right. Yeah, we have a politics channel. Come join if you'd like. But yeah, anyway, come check us out. If you haven't checked us out already, you're missing out. And those who have, thanks for the support. Appreciate, love all of you. And hopefully I take down the 5-5 tomorrow with my single lineup. It will be disgusting.
Let's go. Good luck.
Talk to you guys later. Thanks so much. And let's win another slate.